You get either the electric chair or do 2 hours of community service. I refuse to vote for the lesser of two evils. Okay, then other people will decide for you. They decided the electric chair. My non-vote sent a message! Anonymous. Many newly politically woke people on the left are open and passionate about new ideas, but much like most pro-lifers, have zero understanding in historical context or in-depth understanding of current party bylaws or why they exist. While these bylaws may appear unfair, which they may be, they are much fairer than ever in history, and because they don't have any historical context of how hard it was to get to this point and how recent, they believe it's all a big conspiracy against them. Or because they didn't get the candidate in the party they want, both sides must be equally evil. In my ideal world, ranked choice voting would exist so there could be multiple parties on the same playing field. The Electoral College wouldn't exist and gerrymandering would be outlawed. Each candidate who got enough signatures would get the same amount of public funds as every other candidate, and outside money would be illegal. I wish the Voting Rights Act was a constitutional amendment. I wish we had Medicare for all. No student debt. Free college for all. A carbon and automation tax would provide either a universal basic income or energy, clothing, food, and housing credits for all. I wish there was an equal rights amendment for women, gay, and trans people. I wish there was a living wage based on cost of living per county and adjusted for inflation. I wish parties could have any rule they wanted and the two main parties weren't the only gateway to being in higher office. I wish we had paid public defenders, the same as we pay public prosecutors, and cops required screenings against hate groups and domestic violence. I wish for a lot more things that would make this nation the ideal nation for all. But as my shrink told me years ago, not having your ideal just leads to depression, anger, and sadness. A way to get some progress to make your ideal the real is to find the midpoint between your ideal and the real and shoot for that. I have my ideal world in my head, but to make the real world move even a smidge closer to the ideal world, I have to get into the weeds and fully understand what the current political party and situation is. It's dirty, messy, counterintuitive, and unsavory, but unless you understand it and accept it for what it is and meet voters where they currently are, you can't begin to find the mechanisms for change. Also, it's getting more and more transparent and less messy than ever. But if you have zero understanding of how bad it used to be, you will walk into the party with an ideal worldview, and man are you going to be let down. Us Democrats who have been in politics for decades were really damn proud of how transparent and inclusive the party was in 2016 compared to what it used to be, especially with the leaked emails. But a new generation, newly inspired by Bernie with stars in their eyes, naively as to how the nitty-gritty of the system worked, and blind to party rules and political history, got completely blindsided and had a very rude awakening to how politics actually works, as opposed to the magical thinking that often schools teach you. While we old-timers were thrilled at just how much better the party was this time around than last time, the internet was able to spread that it was all a big conspiracy against Bernie, even though he really only started truly campaigning halfway through the election season once he got popular, and the people he appealed to were people who didn't understand closed primaries, which have always existed. He didn't get a primary voter drive out soon enough and lost the primary. Yes, there were some shenanigans in state party in Arizona and New York, and shenanigans on both sides in Nevada, but that wasn't close enough to causing him to lose. None of the superdelegates were for Bernie because for a party to function, everyone has to be pulling their own weight, so that down-ticket candidates who can't use the same national voter pool for donations actually have a fighting chance. He never did a damn thing for the Democratic Party before and even happily took their billionaire donor money for his Senate campaign that he blocked the party from running in, or they would end up splitting the vote. 10% of burners didn't vote or voted green. 10% voted for Trump, and we ended up with a president who daily creates constitutional crises, destroys civil rights, and has appointed 2 Supreme Court justices that will continue yearly to scale back worker and abortion and voting right protections for decades to come, just because they couldn't see the bigger picture because they felt their candidate was slighted by Hillary and refused to vote for the lesser of two evils, when she was, in all reality, the halfway point between your real and ideal. I even heard people say Hillary was happy about the Citizens United ruling, completely ignorant that an attack movie against her was the cause of that court ruling, and she didn't want super PACs to exist at all. and you can't bring a knife to a gunfight if you want to win, even if it feels super icky. They didn't realize that because of Citizens United, lawmakers have to spend half their time on the phone debasing themselves to rich people for party donations or lose elections down ticket, losing power and hurting way more people if the other side wins. Leftists hate liberals for not being progressive enough, but if they don't have an option to vote for another leftist, a liberal will at least protect your freedom of speech and expression and allow your voices to be heard, unlike during the McCarthy hearings when all leftists thought was essentially purged from America or blackballed from working again. If you want to make any change, you have to work to at least aim toward the middle. In the 2018 election, so many progressive new voters hated Joe Donnelly of Indiana and Claire McCaskill of Missouri, so they didn't vote for them, allowing Mitch McConnell to keep the Senate and pander to every single one of Trump's whims and be his enabler. You have to have a complex understanding of two political worlds, your ideal political world and the real political nitty-gritty, and an understanding of how much better we are than where we used to be, and how to use strategy so that even if you don't like your party's candidate, understand the knock-on effects such as Senate or House control or decades-long Supreme Court nominations if you don't hold your nose and vote not for the lesser of two evils, but the midpoint between your ideal and real world. Unless you do that, the distance between the real and ideal will keep moving wider and wider apart, and you will feel truly hopeless and just give up instead of shooting for and accepting the midpoint, inching you ever closer to your ideal world. Keep 1 foot in your ideal world, 1 foot in your real world, and never confuse the two, or you'll end up quickly losing ground instead of slowly gaining ground. Reality and life are only as fair as we make it, and it slowly gets better with the hard-working midpoint shooters. Not the lesser of two evils, just the closest to your midpoint that will move your real and ideal much closer together. So thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I'm sure there was nothing controversial about this, and everyone will happily get along in the comments section, which you can do on the YouTube version of this video, or my Facebook page, After School Democracy. Link in the show notes. Just a reminder that I'm Anubis2814 on YouTube, and I have over 500 videos on different topics that I've made over the past 10 years. Please subscribe, and if your podcast site has the option, give me a like or review. If you think what I have to say informed you, consider supporting my Patreon. I'll be doing this podcast weekly and try to get it out on the same day, so I hope to see you here next week, ready to be filled with new ideas. Take care. A big thank you goes out to Elias Garcia Guevara and Joe Taylor, who sponsor the show at $10 a month at the Wapawet level on Patreon. Please consider donating as well if you can, and thank you all for listening.